Hello and welcome to Turning Point Tactics, the competitive Kill Team 40k podcast, focused on giving you the strategies and tactics to seize initiative every turning point. I'm your host Ryan, and I'm joined by Connor's in-depth knowledge of Kentucky Fried Croup to my encyclopedic knowledge of long-legged, long-necked birds. Connor, how are you doing this evening, Connor?
Well, right, stop. Spoilers. Some of us might not have been up to date yet with the KillTeam casual episode. Should probably put a spoiler on them. That's true. Yeah, you should be watching it, shouldn't you? Really.
You should be fully up to date. It's a fantastic pod, and we had a great fun evening actually, getting on and doing some Legions of Rust. Where I did better than expected. I won't give away the result, but I did better than expected. So we'll see how people think I did. But yeah. Anyway, what's new with you?
Not a lot, but you've had a busy weekend. We've not been able to record for a bit. What have you been up to?
Yeah, I think we haven't talked about sort of anything because we had the balanced data slate. We rushed straight into that last weekend, so we missed a couple of tournaments. So the first tournament, which obviously I want to talk about most because it's about me. Me. No, I went down to London. I got to play in an ITD tournament, which is really good fun, and it was at Dark Sphere, really well hosted. I took Legionaries and I managed to come away with the first place. So that was a nice fun tournament. Some great games. Game 3 was a bit of a bye, but apart from that, the rest of them were really good, which was awesome. So there was like a mini fire or something. It was, but anyway, it's by the by. But then the next weekend, we had a absolute blast, and I was at Sanctuary in Sutton Ashton with my boy Jason. Had been hosting a couple of tournaments now, and this time we got up to, I think it was 32 players, maybe more.
Nice.
No, 32. Yeah, it was 32, and it was mixed rounds. So it was, you started off on open, and then we went into YTD. I wasn't quite so successful, but Turning Point Tactics as a team was really successful, and it was absolutely epic. So Dan, who we all know and love at D's Nuts, managed to come away with third place, which is like, again, just epic. I think he had one draw, but did really well on his tack ops. And then there was this other guy. What's that other teammate called, Connor?
Yeah, we have another teammate. Yeah, I can never. His Majesty, I think that's his name.
His Majesty. Yeah, that guy. Anyway, that other guy begins with a B.
Does
anyway,
begin with a B. Yeah.
B. Is it B? Is it Ben? Is it Ben?
Obi-Wan.
Anyways, Obi-Wan. Yeah. So anyway, Obi came away with first place. He's gonna hate this. He's gonna hate this.
He's gonna be fuming.
Like, I just want recognition. All right,
sorry,
you can have recognition.
You did very well.
So, he crushed me as well, which is, it was a very deserving victory. So yeah, we met in the last round, and he took his legionary. He was still running Nurgle post nerf. I was running in session, and he played a really good game.
Nice.
I was too defensive, didn't move up enough, and he played an amazing turn 2. Took away a bunch of my points, denied me VP, and I just couldn't come back from it. So it was a great moment where, as I said on the other podcast the other day, but I was like, if I have one more turning point, I can get this back. I'll make it up. And it's like, well, it's not a 5-turn game, right? It's a 4-turn game. So you lost. So that was really good fun. But obviously, this week the primary focus is, well, we got a tactical tip. But the main thing is giving some support back to our patrons who've been giving us out. So we've got a whole bunch of questions that we want to answer, don't we, Connor?
Yeah.
So I think we should probably crack on with those. If there's anything else you want to talk about.
No, let's jump straight in. So, first of all, the first question: how do I get out of the habit of prioritizing kills over VP?
This is a great question because it's probably something that everyone's guilty of when they first start. Well, in fact, Connor, why don't you lead with this one? Because you maybe have some thoughts about being aggro, whatever else.
Yeah, first of all, why do you want to change this habit? It sounds like a good habit you've got. As a fix, why don't we take seek and destroy? Take them as tac ops. 2 birds, 1 stone.
Well, you know what? You make a great point, right? So, and I think the way I would answer this question is there's really 2 ways of looking at it, right? So, you can try and fix this in a sense of maybe you create like a crib sheet or a checklist where you make every time you go to make a decision in the game, you reference it, but that might draw your game out, might make it too long for you, or you start doing like a lot of repetitions and you try and ask yourself the question before every action. is this scoring me VP? Yes or no? Is this going to help me with my win condition? Yes or no? And you try and approach it from that point of view. Or it's a potential that you're playing a team that isn't matching your play style, right? We talked about selecting the right play style that's going to match what you want to do as a player. And if you find that this is a habit that you cannot break, right? It's like a die-hard habit. I just love getting stuck in and killing people. Then I think you're right? You need to select a team that's going to match that. And maybe you look at that Seek and Destroy tac op deck and go, all right, I need a team that's going to work really well with these tac ops, because I'm always going to take the opportunity to kill someone, and I want to make sure that I'm scoring VP whilst doing that, so I don't lose the game as I go through. And also that helps you deny your opponent VP at the same time. So Seek and Destroy is in a great place right now, and I would say those are two options. One is you practice more and more and more with like a checklist or a set question you ask yourself before you do an activation to try and break that habit. Or you embrace it and you go, this is my play style, this is how I'm going to win, and I need to play a team that leans hard into that. And if I try and play a slow and cautious team, it's probably not going to work out for me. So those are sort of the two options that I would say, and maybe just having more practice games would help you overcome option one. But if not, then lean into option two, embrace it, and find that team and play style that really matches you, so that you're getting VP for doing the stuff that you want to do. So hopefully that helps. We got a couple more though. Connor, what else we got?
Yeah. So second question: what are the benefits and risks of revealing tac ops early?
Oh, great question. And this is something that I've seen you do really well against me as well. So I think the benefit of these, like, holding these things back, is a lot of mind games, right? And you can really mess up your opponent's game plan. So I do at the competitive level, you should expect that your opponent knows all of the tac ops, right? Like when I'm going into the third and fourth rounds, I expect that they know what all the tac ops are available, what your faction tac ops are, and your opponent is trying to guess what it is that you're trying to score based on what you revealed and that sort of stuff. So if you're into midway through turning point 3, and I've seen that you've already got Eliminate Guards and you've already got Rout, I'm going to guess that you've got Rob and Ransack, and you're looking for a late game melee kill to try and score 2 VP and keep that last guy alive, potentially, right? That's one thing I'm looking at. But also maybe you go into whatever game and you reveal Seize Ground. Well, I know now that you're not trying to get Eliminate Guards or anything like that, because you're locked into your security archetype, whatever it is. But I might be looking instead for you to try and do the escort operative, where you're trying to get your guy into my deployment zone or something like that, right? So I'm now looking at it from a different point of view of how I can deny you points as and where it's going to be. Maybe I need to be further forward because you're playing security, so I need to make sure that I'm able to get into your half to deny you, hold them back, that kind of thing. So the benefits of it is, like, if you have the opportunity to score early, it can be really good. So like if you know that there's a guaranteed way that you're going to get, let's say you're playing recon and you're definitely going to get secure vantage turn 1, and that's like I'm always going to do this action and I want that VP turn 1 because I don't want to be hanging around turn 2, then yeah, like you go for it, you get that early VP lead. But let's say, like, I don't know, let's say you're playing a team like Wormblade and you have Infiltration or Seek and Destroy. Like, maybe you don't pop Gather Surveillance turn 1 and you just try and do it turn 2, so that you keep your opponent guessing and they hold their leader back or whatever because they're worried about Headhunter. And I got caught out the other day when I was playing against Ryan these Commandos, because I wasn't expecting him to take Headhunter, right? Like, I've been through so many competitive games now and I just wasn't expecting it, but he took it and he stacked it with Rob and Ransack and he killed my leader. And suddenly I was looking down at a 3 or 4 point swing if I couldn't kill his commander Nob, because that was the main target. So I had to throw loads of resources out trying to kill this guy, and the game came down to 1 point. It was so close because I gave him two VP straight away with that, which was a very risky take to do. So that what I would say is that there's mind games is where I look at tac ops, and I'm always expecting my opponent to know what I have, or to have a guess at what I have. And if you can keep them somewhat vague and keep the options open, then it's going to make it harder for them to know exactly what best to do in that circumstance. And maybe they don't know, oh, maybe I should do this, maybe I should do that, whatever, and they can't formulate the perfect game plan against you. Any thoughts on that, Connor?
I agree 100%. There's an opportunity there to use mind games to change how your opponent's actually going to play. So if we look at the Legionary example, they're a team that can take security or seek and destroy, and at turn 0, it's like Schrodinger's cat. You could have either one, and they don't know which one it is. As soon as you reveal one, the opponent knows. So if you flip and you've got a security attack up, they know there's no chance of you having Headhunter, and they can start being aggressive. But just the fact that you might have Headhunter will probably force them to play a little bit more cagey with their sergeant, who's usually a strong model. And if similarly, what do you gain by revealing early on that you've got, like, let's say you've got to eliminate guards? It's very likely they're not securing an objective turn 1. That possibly could be, but are you going to kill that model? Because it might be in their deployment zone heavy cover. It could be a very challenging kill anyway. Is it likely that you're going to get that point turn 1? Maybe you can reveal it turn 2 and keep some mystery as to what you're actually trying to do, what your game plan is, and force them to play in a different way. Similarly, I used to do a similar tactic with Kroot. So I'd reveal recover item early on because people know that that's probably what you're going to take with Kroot, because it's almost guaranteed 2 points. But because you pay the 1 VP mercenaries to shuffle in implant and balance the books, you don't need to reveal them because you can score them both 2 points in turn 2. And suddenly your opponent, hopefully, I think it's probably obvious now, it's quite a known tactic, but at the time, your opponent didn't know, and then by the time you revealed, there was no way for them to intervene and stop you from scoring all 6.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's kind of the way I look at it. Is there is a finite window where the mind games kind of stop, and that's really turning point 2. I think it's unusual that you're not going to be popping things on turning point 2. So I think the mind games is turning point 1, because for instance, let's say you're playing Seek and Destroy. Well, route, you're never going to score turning point 1, right? Like, you're not going to get your model into your opponent's deployment zone and kill models unless you're playing hyper aggressive. And if there's like an Alpha Strike opportunity and you can do it, fine. There's always an exception to the rule. I accept that. But like, generically, you're not going to do that. Combine that with the fact that your opponent has to move models onto the objective early, so that if they don't have any pre-game move, you're not going to be able to pop eliminate guards anyway. So revealing it is just like showing your hand and going, well, this is what I'm doing. So if you hold back and just wait till turning point 2, then they always have in the back of their head, well, maybe they're going to play defensive and go for the security. So maybe I need to position my models up threat to be able to get across the board and sit in their half. And actually then you got Seek and Destroy, and it's like, well, now I've put a load of models out that are within killing range. And now actually you can move your models on and start effectively and efficiently killing them. So I think that's probably where I would say the line is generically, as a rule of thumb, don't reveal much on turn 1 apart from what you have to. And then on turn 2 is where you then show your hand, and that's where you try and get the points, because you want to maximize your opportunity to score, but at the same time you don't want to throw it away early. So unless you have a really good reason to do it on turn 1, I would say generically don't.
I think that's the risk element. I think that's what you took away from your match versus Ben, is that there is a clock. There's only 4 turns that you can be scoring these points. So by revealing on turn 2, say central control, rather than having 4 opportunities at scoring that, you've now moved it down to 3 opportunities. But perhaps that's brought you your opponent positioning in a way where they now can't stop you from doing that. But definitely look at revealing turn 2.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you could do it turn 3, but it's just going to make it even harder for you. And if your opponent succeeds in denying you that 1 VP, well, now you can no longer max. So that's a really good point. Okay, let's go to the next question, Connor.
Yeah. What is the most one-sided matchup, and how do you even those odds?
So I had a bunch of thoughts about this, and I couldn't figure out what it was going to be. So I then started messaging in the WhatsApp groups, being like, "Hey guys, what do you think is the most one-sided matchup?" And the most common answer, which I do agree with, is Exaction Squad into I'd say elites, but either Legionary or Intercession. And we'll talk about Intercession because I think it's probably the roughest matchup that there is. And I'll sort of explain why I think it's a problem. So the the only real solution that Exaction Squad have against this team is to try and shoot them. And Intercession is really good at like punishing you for that because they have Wrath of Vengeance, they can shoot on death. So you have to expose your big killing models to try and whittle down these guys, and you don't really have any AP or any way to achieve it. And therefore the matchup is the most heavily stacked against you it can be. Now you also have the option of security or seek and destroy, and you think to yourself, okay, well I can't kill these guys, so I'm going to try and go positional and use security. But actually, that's so easy for them to deny, right? Because they want to move up, they want to go into your board half, and they want to kill you, and they're probably going to do that very efficiently. So I don't think you're going to kill many models when it comes to this team. So you really have to try and use your activation advantage, and you have to try and use like a concentration of efforts. So you're probably only going to kill 3 models. So you've got to make sure that those models that you kill is going to score you points, or it's going to make your opponent have a really difficult time scoring points themselves. So I would look at the models that they want to send up the board, and I would try and stack my tac ops against them and stack my abilities against them. So it might be that your leader, with his ability to offer Relentless, is going to go against their Grenadier model, or if they've bought like a Plasma Pistol Sergeant against him, so any of the Assault Ancestors that want to get up in your face and try and do damage. And then, as much as possible, you just want to focus on killing the ones that you can kill and stacking the secondaries where you can stack them. Now, that is by no means like you're going to win the game. That's like how do you try and get the points that you can where you can, right? So I kind of think that's the only way around it, and you just have to really hard play into the mission. It might be that you end up sort of charge blocking people and sitting guys on objectives, so you have 4 APL to loot it or capture it, whatever it is, and you just try and as much as possible play for those VP. So I think weirdly in that matchup, I don't think you play security, which sounds nuts to me, but like I don't think you can afford to, because they can just deny the points so easily with central line, all that sort of stuff, and you don't have the models to be able to directly break it. So I think you have to lean into trying to kill just a few models and maximizing the points with them. And it might be that's a eliminate guard, and you use your crack grenade, and you use the fact that it's got no cover, you use the rerolls, try and do as much damage as possible, and then try and focus someone down and whittle them down and kill them. And I think that might be the only real way that you can do it. And you've got to hope that as much as possible, use those shotguns to full advantage to get the damage in and secure those kills, even though they're probably going to shoot on death and they're probably going to kill you, which is going to be rough. But I think that's the hardest matchup in the game at the moment. And I think the only way you can win it is just focus on that win condition. You've got to play that VP at all times and just be like, how do I score points as efficiently as possible and try and keep this close? And it's going to be rough.
We've only had the one game with Exaction Squad, and that's when I was taking the mick a little bit and ran corner against you. But 2 things you did that I quite liked. You synergized your sniper model, and I don't know the Exaction Squad models well enough, but there was a model there was a way you were generating automatic crits and playing that quite nicely.
The ability to make a regular hit into a crit, yeah.
That synergized quite nicely. I was doing a surprising amount, because again, going into it, I wasn't expecting much damage from you, and was taking more damage than I thought from that combo. That was quite good. And 2, the ability to shoot into combat was quite nice. So you could tie up with a model and then safely shoot with your shotguns. Again, non-reciprocal shooting, essentially, that I thought was quite nice. But even then, that was a close game.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I think you have to play it, right? So you have to just focus down and just try and get rid of each of those elite boys as they come at you. And just be like, can I just kill this one guy? Yeah. Can I kill the next guy? And then, look at your opponent and what they're scoring. And if they pop Robin Ransack on someone early, be like, right, how do I kill that guy and deny that 1 VP? Because that's what the game's going to come down to, is those points. So how do I, as efficiently as possible, deny my opponent VP and try and score as much as I can do in the meantime? But it's rough. And, if you figure out that matchup and you find a reliable way of winning it, let us know, because I'm really interested to hear. but yeah. Okay, hopefully that helps. Alrighty.
Also,
Next question.
Let us know in the comments if you think there's a rougher matchup out there that we've missed. Let us know about that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Let's do the next question. What is your opinion on pre-measuring, in particular the effect on ambush ploys and their ability to intervene?
So this is a great question. I mean, this is kind of like we sort of talked a little bit about like gaming etiquette beforehand, because it can be a bit of a feels bad on either side, right? So like if you're the guy that has the interrupt action, well, are you just going to let your opponent never trigger it because you're always going to be so nice that you tell them that you can, and therefore you're never going to win. So I personally think that the way that you play this is at the start of the game, you explain to them what abilities you have, and you say, have you ever played, let's say it's Corsairs, have you ever played Corsairs before? And they say, no, I've never played Corsairs before. And you go, okay, cool, I've got an ability called Deadly Ambush, which means that if you come within 3 inches of one of my guys when they're on engage order, I can spend a CP and I can charge you and let you do that, right? And at which point you've explained it to them, and they know the rule then, right? And they can't then say later on, well, I didn't know that, because you've made it clear. And then as the game goes on, the way that I would do it is I would let people fully finish their action. You can ask a question like, say they'll go, I'm going to move this guy to here, and then I'm going to shoot this person. And then you go, okay, have you finished with your placement? And they'll go, yeah. You go, right, just before you shoot, just stop there. I'm going to spend a CP and I'm going to do this. And that's how you have to play it. And I think that's fair and the most balanced way of doing it, because if you don't, then if you let them roll dice, whatever, and then say, "Oh no, I'm spending a CP," then it's too far, whatever. I think that's how you have to do it, and it's the same for and there's plenty of other examples. It's like the blooded ability to shift shots over to the other person. So it's like you let them say, "I'm declaring a shooting attack," and you go, "Okay, are you happy at shooting my butcher, whatever?" And they go, "Yeah, I'm going to shoot your butcher with this guy with the bolt weapon." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm spending a CP. I'm using Dark Favor, and I'm going to shift that attack onto the other person," right? So I think that's how you do it. Is you have to let them finish what they're doing, and that's the point where it's like they've finished their maneuver, and then you go, all right, now we're going to do this. And I think that's probably the best way of playing it. I don't know if there's any other way around it really, where it doesn't result in a feel bad for either side, and that's kind of the thing. So, but the game is fully there to be pre-measured, right? And if your opponent asks you, do you have any abilities to interrupt? Then you have to sort of be honest and say, I have a tactical ploy, which lets me do X, Y, and Z, and these are the limitations of it. And if they measure out and they go, well, I'm going to sit just outside of your ability to charge me, well, that's fair enough. And hopefully you get to the point in your own game where you start positioning where it's like, well, you'll be obscured if you go that far away, potentially, and they have to come round, or to gain visibility, they have to come in that threat range or whatever it's going to be. And then your own placement can guarantee that these actions become a factor. And then you go, well, the only way you get the shot is by becoming in range, and there is a risk that I'll spend the CP. And you have to debate whether or not you think I'll do that, because maybe I do, maybe I don't. And that's probably the way I would play it. But any thoughts going on that? Any disagreement that you have?
One thing is also, let's consider perhaps they know you can do that, and they're actually trying to bait you to do your ambush there because there's a better ambush you could have down the road that they want to play on the other flank. They're trying to do that way. But I think if you're asking the question, before I move, have you got any way to interrupt movement? Like, a sort of generic question like that, I think that's fair enough. And they can consider it and go, okay, well, actually, I think that'd be fine because I can take you in combat, or do you know what? That's probably not worth it. That's fair.
Because that is the point of the game, right? It's like, it's all about making decisions. And I think what the thing is, if you give them the information and they make a decision, and if they move a model and go like, hey, I want to place my model here, but is that outside of your deadly ambush range? And then you look at it and you go, actually, that is within the range. And they go, okay, I'm going to move it and do something different. Then that's the game, right? Like that's them saying, I know you have this ability, I'm going to stay outside of it so I don't get triggered by it. And you never want to be in a scenario where someone goes, I'm moving here to avoid deadly ambush, and you go, yep, that's fine. And then you go, actually, sorry, you mismeasured by, a quarter of an inch or less, and I'm going to get you with this. That's a feel bad for me. So they've made the right decision, and they're asking you as the thing, playing by intent. This is my intent to avoid this ability that you have. Is that okay? And then you move on from there. But that's kind of like my points on it.
I think playing by intent, that was my other part about pre-measuring. Playing by intent, we can spend all day trying to find that perfect point that may be there. I'm sure it is there, but it just take 10 minutes to find it. But we've both got lives to lead. Well, not you, obviously, Ryan, but the rest of the world have lives to live afterwards and families to see. And, we're just trying to have a game at the end of the day. If we can say there probably is a gap there that's 3 inches away, I'm happy with that. I can see what you're trying to do. Equally, if it was a very competitive environment like a tournament, I think that's where the clocks come in. We've only got an hour and a half. It's just the nature of trying to fit 4 games into a day. If you want to spend your 45 minutes measuring every possible angle and every possible distance, fine, but perhaps there's better ways to spend that 45 minutes that you've got.
Yeah, and you might time out. That's a good point as well.
Cool. I think we answered that. I hope we answered that for you. Okay, got another question here. How to deal with teams that can ignore obscurity?
Yeah, so this is going to become really relevant because obviously with all the balance changes that have just come out, you've got Phobos coming out of the woodworks, and they're a team that can play around obscurity really well. And we did an episode in episode 15, where we talked about the various methods of non-reciprocal shooting. And I just wanted to sort of like emphasize that non-reciprocal shooting in its most basic form is focused on that use of obscurity as a way so that you can shoot and your opponent can't. But there is so many different ways of being able to achieve the same outcome. And so I just think that, go back and listen to episode 15, you should be able to get all that good gen. We go into far more detail. But I think that's where you have to go back to your core principles. Like, okay, well, this guy can ignore that. How else can I make sure that it works? Can you use a weapon with a high enough reliability to kill them in one shot? So that you can then kill them before they can kill you? Can you use visibility blocking? Can you charge block them? So is it limited to a single model? Can you just charge that model and mean that they then can't do what they want to do without falling back or whatever, and then they can't shoot? Or, does that model require visibility? Is there a way that you can use visibility from where that model is to avoid detection? So maybe not hiding behind something, but going to a certain place on the battlefield where that model has to move to be able to shoot you, and then maybe they have unwieldy or something like that, and suddenly it doesn't work. So you have to focus on those core principles of what else you can use to avoid detection. Maybe it's just that you have to use the conceal order, and the conceal function much more effectively. So that's probably the way I'd skin it, is think about all those other methods that you have available to you to solve that problem, and don't just focus on just using the standard obscurity for non-reciprocal shooting.
I agree 100%. I feel everyone gets bogged down in the non-reciprocal shooting is using heavy terrain to allow a one-way shot. But as we've discussed before in episode 15, there's so much more to it than that, and so many different ways that you could use that to have similar non-reciprocal shooting against a team that can ignore obscuring.
Cool. All right, Connor, I think that's covered off all the Patreon questions. Hopefully that was of some use. But for people that are listening and thinking, that was really, really useful, I would love to be able to get some of my questions answered. Is there a way that they could support the podcast and receive the same sort of level of support that we give to our patrons?
Yeah, so the easiest way to support us is just to hit like and hit subscribe. If we can get to 1,000 subscribers, then that's the point when YouTube will start to monetize us, and we're growing every day and getting pretty close now. Thanks to everyone that's done that. It's love to see the community grow like this. It's brilliant. But if you wanted to provide immediate support, then you could join our Patreon for as little as £3 a month, which would be able to fund Ryan's IT lessons to get his microphone working. But for you, that would get you early access to all our videos, as well as some exclusive Patreon-only content, and also access to our Patreon priority questions like today, where we can answer the questions that you've got. Additionally, we've also got an affiliate link with Element Games. So if you're going to buy any Warhammer goodies, if you click on the link down below and buy it through that, that'll also help support the podcast too.
Ideal. You nailed affiliate again, Connor. You're getting pretty good at this. Okay, so I think we should probably head into a tactical tip so we can close off this episode and hopefully make it nice and compact and full of goodness, which is what we're all about. So, tactical tip this week is win or learn, and that is how you never lose, right? So, if you go away from every game with two options, right? Like either you're going to win the game and you're going to have good fun, you've done whatever, or you're going to take something away and learn from the game. And if you do that, you're never actually losing, right? So, I went away at the weekend and I learned a whole bunch, right? So I played in session into Legionary. It didn't go the way I wanted it to because my game plan was wrong, because I assessed the game wrong and my strategy was wrong. And now I've learned from that. And now I know that if I play into Dark into Legionary again, there is a way around it, and there's a solution to that problem set. And it's the same thing, when I went and played against Clostry at Warhammer World. Like, there was so much lessons that I took away from those games that I could then reapply at a later date. And that's what's kind of letting me play a lot of variety of teams, right? Is because I'm seeing how other people play teams, I'm seeing how they lose and how they win, and then when they go away from those games, I can learn from them and learn from what they did well and what they did badly, or what they didn't do quite so well at, and suddenly I can take that into my own game plan and hopefully improve my game. So this is kind of like the most important thing when it comes to being a competitive gamer, and it's all about the mindset you have to have if you want to be successful. Is this mindset of there is always something to learn from a game. Because if you take away from a game and you just say, I lost because of dice, well, it's so rare, I think, genuinely, so rare that you lose a game purely on dice, right? There is so many decisions that lead up to the point where you're rolling dice on a table, and that becomes a factor. And this is how I'll explain it, because this is kind of like the way various military debriefing systems work, so they can learn and enhance your performance at the best level that you can do. And this is how they do it, and it's a system that you can apply to competitive games to be able to get the most out of it as well. So let's say that you've got into a scenario and your plasma gunner has come around the corner and he is shooting at whoever, and you roll whatever it is, your 4 2s, and that's it. You've fluffed, and that single dice roll has cost you the game, because then your plasma gunner dies, whatever it is, right? And you think, you know what? The only reason I lost them was because of bad luck, because I rolled 4 2s and I had a 70% chance to kill the guy, but for whatever reason, it didn't work out. What I'm going to say to you is why were you in a position where there was a 30% chance where you could just lose the game, right? Like, that's the question that I think needs to be answered, right? Because people are there going, well, it on average, it should have worked out, and then maybe I would have won by a point. And it's like, okay, but 30% of the games that you play in that play style, you're not going to win. So if you go to a tournament, you're playing 4 rounds, well, actually, statistically, you're going to lose one of those games. So the reason why that I think that's really important is you have to ask yourself, why did you get into a position in the first place where that dice roll became so crucial? And then if you rewind and you keep looking at the decisions that got you to that point, is there anything you can learn along the way as to why it became so critical that you were there? And this goes all the way back, right? So you can go all the way back to your KillTeam selection pre-event. Maybe you chose, wherever it is, Legionary into the Kazakin meta, and you then realized halfway through that it was the wrong team for the tournament you were in, or whatever it was, right? So you took Blooded on open board and it wasn't working out for you. Whatever the answer is, right? So you can take it back to that very first decision of the models that you have chosen to go to the tournament with, and maybe that's where the error is. Or maybe it's to do with the preparation that you put in pre-tournament. The game plans you had and all that sort of stuff, and the decisions you're making and the practice you had wasn't sufficient. So you didn't have the right rules at your disposal, because you forgot that when you got to that point, actually for 1 CP you had Veterans of the Long War, and you could have just spent a CP and re-rolled it all. But maybe you didn't have the CP. And why didn't you have the CP? Did you spend it frivolously beforehand? Did you have a good budget that you needed to have ahead of time so you could make sure you had the right CP available and you knew how much CP that you had? Maybe you didn't have the right kill team selection because you didn't have an icon on your team. So when your champ died on turn 1 because you're playing too aggressive, you then lost your free abilities, and you then overspent on CP trying to make up for it, which then meant you didn't have 1 CP available for Veterans of Long War. This is the sort of stuff I'm getting to. So it's like, what decision was it? Because was it actually that you rolled 4 2s? Or was there a decision that you made way earlier that has affected it? And that's kind of the point that I want to go into. So it's like, what is the actual reason you lost? And this is like what we call root cause analysis. So you have a whole bunch of contributing factors, and it might be that your dice rolls on the day was a contributing factor. So part of the reason you lost was bad luck. Okay, fine, but it's very rare that that's the root cause. Now, it might be that, you took a bunch of low risk options as you went through and just rolled statistically ridiculously, and then as a result you lost, and fine, like that could be the reason, and that could be the root cause. But I'm saying more often than not, it's not that. And by saying it is, you're cheating yourself of a valuable lesson that you can go through and learn from. So, think about the win condition. It's almost always to do with points. Normally it's to do with like your tac op selection, or it's to do with your kill team selection, or the way you play primaries or something like that. That's what's getting you to where you need to be. So we can do the analysis of my game versus Ben the other day, where I lost. So on turn one, my models weren't in a position that they could then capitalize on turn two and push into my opponent's half, because Legionary is really good at burst damage, right? So they're very good at spending an AP to open a door, shooting and moving, right? Whereas I needed volume. So I need to use all of my actions. I needed to have the doors already open to move forwards and double tap the Legionary to be able to secure the kill. And that's the point, right? So my turn one game plan was wrong. Now, I could have just said, oh, well, he rolled really well and he killed my guy with a plasma gun. Well, maybe. But I actually think he rolled statistically poorly, right? Like throughout the whole of the game, he didn't roll well, but he still beat me because his game plan was better and the luck didn't come into it, right? So that's the point. Like, if anything, if we looked at the dice, I think I rolled hot all game and he rolled poorly all game, but he still won because his game plan was better. And that's the point that I want people to take away, is that you can remove these like elements of luck from the game by learning from these lessons. And now I know I need volume, right? Like, I need to be able to get those volume of fire. I need to have models in the right place to be able to do the right things and get the right stuff out of it. I think that's a huge thing to take away, right? Is that you can always win at Kill Team if you learn lessons or win the game, and that's how you never lose. And that's a mindset you have to take into it, and that's how you try and go forwards. Any thoughts on that, Connor?
First of all, I just want to point out that Ben wouldn't have survived turn 5, so let's consider that.
I had him on turn 5, man. Just you wait and see. Like, on turn 5, he was going down. He was going down hard. But yeah, we couldn't play turn
5. Secondly, yeah, that's the way it goes. Secondly, I think you make a really excellent point. If you just reframe your mindset, your opponent has given you an opportunity here. They've revealed a weakness in your strategy, and if you can find that weakness and rectify it, you're a stronger player. You're a better player with one less weakness. Like, I think big businesses often hire people deliberately to find exploits in their IT software, so then they're aware of the exploits and can then fix them. It's an opportunity for you to become a better player. It's a great point.
And I think, interestingly, the way I'd you can break these down as well. So you can have decision errors, or you can have execution errors, and that might be where you've actually moved the model into the wrong place, and what you need to do to solve that is, if you intended to put that model there, well, that's a decision error. If you intended them to be in range of something else and you haven't put them in the right area so they can't do that, well, that's a placement error, and you need more practice. You need to start pre-measuring more, and maybe that's the solution to improve next time. Is like, well, actually, I had the right game plan, but my models were in the wrong place because I wasn't doing the right thing, and I actually need to be more careful and methodical with my placement of models. And it might be worth us, reattacking this kind of another episode where I can break down this, a little bit further and talk about how you get to that root cause, which a lot of it, to be honest, is just about asking the question why until it becomes too painful. So it's like, why did your plasma gunner not kill the guy? Didn't have rerolls. Why didn't you have rerolls? Why didn't you have any CP? Why didn't you have any CP? And you just keep going until it's like, I was too frivolous with my leader turn 1 and threw him away when he was my only mark, and therefore I overspent. That might be it. And you go, okay, boom, that's the root cause. So next, the lesson is, in that matchup, when I'm taking that team selection, I need to be more cautious with my leader so I don't throw them away, and as a result, I have the CP I need to be able to spend on the right things. And that's my CP budget management is what lost me that game, not the dice roll at the end. And I think that's probably a good point to finish on, unless you've got anything else you want to throw in.
I would, yeah, I love the idea of RCA and self-reflection analysis, and we can teach it. But I think what I would say is when you're tilted and you've just lost a game is the worst point to do some reflective self-analysis. It's always going to be the dice's fault. But once you've cooled down a bit and you can actually really analyze the game, that's the point to start thinking, okay, what went wrong? And do it then. Don't do it in the heat of the moment.
And you can always ask your opponent as well. You can just be like, hey, man, and it might be worthwhile sending them a text if you speak to them regularly and just be like, hey, after our game the other night, like, is there anything you think I could have done, like, on reflection, slow time, that you think I could have improved? And they can be like, actually, X, Y, and Z. This is where I think you went wrong. And maybe they're wrong, or maybe they're right, but you might get a different perspective, and that can be so helpful because a lot of the time I've played players and they've gone like, oh, I'm not really sure what I could have done differently there, and I'm like, actually, there was a key decision that I think lost you the game, and I can sometimes point out and say like, this point here, we'll talk about at the end of the game, but I think this is really important. And they'll be like, oh, that's interesting, and I'm not sure why. And then at the end of it, you explain, and they go, oh my, that's like it's a light bulb moment. That's where it went wrong. But yeah, awesome stuff. Well,
perhaps a better question would be instead of asking why did I lose, ask them why did you win, because everyone knows their own strategy. It might be more insightful.
Okay, well, that's going to bring us to the end of this episode. So hopefully you found something new or useful while listening. And if you did, throwing us a like would be greatly appreciated. If you want to make sure you don't miss any episodes, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get a notification as soon as the next one drops. As Connor said, we're already over halfway there, so we're so close to 1,000 subscribers. And if we keep on as we are, that's going to be really, really useful for us as a small channel to get where we need to go. And if you can't wait and you do want early access and you want your questions answered live on the show, we do have a Patreon where, as we said, you get exclusive access to all of our content ahead of time, as well as those Patreon priority questions answered. As always, we'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback, so drop us a comment below and we'll get right to you. Thank you so much for listening. I'm your host, Ryan. This has been Turning Point Tactics, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.